Hey guys, what's going on? So I just wanted to give my opinion on the likely waiver pickups for this week. So starting off with number 9, Alec Pierce, wide receiver on the Colts, 21.5 points. And I think what's really impressive here is that you have a really outstanding offense with the Colts and a really good chance for the Colts to have a good year. But I think what's really concerning is that you don't have a whole lot of completions from Richardson, and really not too much from Pittman, who is supposed to be the wide receiver 1, and you even have Josh Downs, who's supposed to be returning soon from an injury. So I think this week's performance from Pierce should just really be taken with a grain of salt. Next, I would have Madison, running back from the Raiders, 16.2 points this week. I don't think that's too impressive in terms of just a pure points perspective. I think you do have a little bit of a breakout for him, and this could likely lead to more of a workload for him going forward. On a little bit more of the concerning note, you only have 5 rushing attempts, but I think likely they could maybe adopt a little bit more of a committee and put him in there, especially for those receiving yards. Next, I would have Jordan Mason, running back for the 49ers. Really, the big news here is that he replaced McCaffrey with a calf sprain for their opener in Santa Clara. And I really think you do have a solid performance with 22.2 points. But really, I think what's to be considered here is that this was based on 28 carries and a rushing touchdown. And I think just in terms of his performance alone, I do think Jordan Mason definitely earns a lot more reps and a lot more of a split. And I think this would even be good for McCaffrey in the long run. Next, I would have Baker Mayfield at quarterback. Really impressive start here, finishing number 2 for quarterbacks in PPR with 29.7. And I think definitely this is a little bit of a statement here because Mayfield really is significantly underrated in terms of fantasy. You have him hardly getting drafted for anyone. And for being a playoff caliber quarterback, I really think this is fairly low for Mayfield, not even being likely a backup quarterback for most people in fantasy. And there really isn't any other quarterbacks, even if you're looking for a new starting quarterback. Seeing the numbers he laid out could be a good potential season for him all year long. Next, I would have J.K. Dobbins, the running back from the Chargers, with 22.9 points. And a little bit more in relation to Jordan Mason here. I really like Dobbins because he did this not with the starting running back having an injury, but likely because you are going to see a committee in Los Angeles this year. You do have a pretty classic 50-50 split here with him and Edwards. So his performance would put him at the 4th best running back this week overall, which I think is really impressive. Looking at some cons, you do have his 2022 average with the Ravens being just about 10 points per game. In 2020, it was only about 11.2. So that really isn't that impressive if we're looking to estimate his long-term output. But I think looking that he was the clear favorite in terms of overall performance in comparison to Edwards, you likely could see a similar outing from him as the season would go on. Next, I would actually have the Cowboys defense. I think they're always swept under the rug and likely are still available in several fantasy leagues here. I would say the Browns really didn't have too much of a good performance this week, but in terms of where the Browns were at last year and having a healthy Deshaun Watson, I definitely think the Browns are a pretty decent team, whereas you have other defenses really going up against hardly any competition. So that's why I like the Cowboys here. And then looking at what they did last year, the number 1 defense pretty much in all of fantasy, depending on what scoring systems you're using. So I think you're definitely going to get that consistency. And if you are looking for a new defense or just another defense to sit on your bench, I would go with the Cowboys. Really like Jake Moody going 6 for 6 in the Monday night game against the Jets. And what really speaks out to me here is that you have the 49ers who do tend to kick a lot of field goals. And I think especially with Moody going into his 2nd season, he's likely going to be a lot more polished and a lot more comfortable. So that's why I think his overall fantasy trajectory could be elevated this year. When you're looking at the 49ers, I do see this being a pretty consistent turnout for Moody every week. And then at number 2, I would have Allen Lazard, the wide receiver from the Jets. I just think the only concern is here that a lot of his points did also come towards the later half of the game when you had the 49ers pretty much putting it away. And then you even have his touchdown with the backup quarterback that came in for the Jets. But I still think this is a promising performance from Lazard. And if we have a really good offense for the Jets the rest of the season, I think this is a great pickup for a possible flex or even wide receiver spot. And then at number 1, I think this comes at no surprise. I do have Isaiah Likely, the tight end for the Ravens, 26.1 points, which is really outstanding, even higher than a lot of wide receivers, and you really just don't see that for tight ends that often. So I think he likely looks to have won out the tight end 1 spot after his close game loss performance to the Chiefs. And if we are talking about last year as well, after Andrews' injury, if you look at his average for the rest of the season, fairly high there. I think that would even put him at one of the top tight ends in terms of just average points per game. Because when we're looking at a lot of databases for stats in terms of fantasy, his average points per game statistic really gets lost because you have his averages being taken before Andrews' injury, and he didn't really play a whole lot at that point. So I think that's what definitely hindered his positional ranking for the fantasy draft. But again, if we are taking just his average and how he did after Andrews' loss last year, and given his week 1 performance, I definitely think he's someone you could pick up for your tight end and could even finish as the best tight end of the season. So those would be my opinions and rankings on the top waiver pickups after this first week of the NFL season. So feel free to let me know your thoughts on these guys or any other guys you think is worth noting. Really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you later.